talking about tragic, sad boys. Like, it doesn't get any worse.
Hi everyone, welcome to Lovecast the BL podcast. I'm your host Alexa, and with me today are your fellow hosts Pixie and Kayla.
Hey.
Woo. So for today's episode, we're bringing it back to a bit of a casual list episode. I feel like we've done a lot of structured and heavier topics the last couple of weeks, and we have some heavier ones on the horizon as well. So we thought it would be good to just break it up with something that's a little bit more fun, although fun, a little bit more casual. I'm like, it's list episodes are fun, but like the topic of today's list episodes is kind of like, I guess could get a little bit sad when you're talking about the characters.
Yeah.
This was Kayla's idea. We're decided we're gonna do our top poor Meow Meows in BL and GL, which if you've not heard of the phrase poor Meow Meow, it's like an online thing. You know, people use it to describe characters that have like really sad backstories or really sad character arcs that they kind of like latch onto and want to protect and almost like cradle baby them a little bit, but not like in a way that's infantilizing, if that makes sense. But it's just like, that's my poor Meow Meow. Like, I want to keep them safe. Like, they need to be protected from the harms of this world. So yeah, we're going to be going through our poor Meow Meows in BL and GL. And I think we hopefully have a pretty diverse list. I know Kayla and I tend to overlap a lot, but I very purposely tried to choose characters that would avoid that, but we'll still probably end up overlapping in some form. Pixie usually comes in with characters that are a little bit different from the both of us.
Something hits me, so it's fine.
But yeah, so there's not really much to introduce here. Kayla, I know you said before we started that your first character you have a lot of feelings about. So do you wanna start us off?
Yes, I think we should start off strong. I was telling them that the notes for just my first character are like a page and a half long because there's just so much that happens to them. And so my first character is from Thailand, Joe from my stand-in.
Yeah, I knew it was gonna be Joe.
Like, where do you even begin with the tragedy that is his life? Like, I don't think I've seen a more pitiful character in a BL before. His life is literally a series of unfortunate events, and like not even in death does he get peace because it just starts all over again.
Go all over again.
Like,
yeah.
It's really crazy, but I feel like I have to give some context if people haven't seen the show. So basically, Joe is a stunt double, and he ends up becoming a stunt double for this A-list actor named Tong, who is played by Mech, friend of the show. And Tong is a very entitled character. He's very difficult to work with, infamously, and he's just like all around this terrible person in his personal and professional life. And so one day Tong just up and decides that he doesn't want to film his scenes anymore. So he tells the director, just put Joe in as my stand-in in these scenes. And he ends up being his body double, but nobody knows that it's not Tong playing the role. They still think that it's him. And that's really when everything, I think, starts going to shit for Joe in a big way. Like,
There's literally so
Tong,
much.
yeah. I keep mentioning Tong because he's like the villain in
Catalyst.
Joe's story. Yeah. But he's like constantly belittling him and making him like feel really worthless and insignificant, telling him that like he'll never be the star that he is, even though Joe doesn't really want to be the star that he is. Like, he just wants to do his job, get his paycheck, and dip. But Tong puts him in this position where he also feels like he can't say no to doing anything. So over time, it kind of wears away at Joe more and more, and he becomes like the biggest pushover ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's like a big criticism that people have had of his characters, that he just like allows stuff to happen to him. But I feel like he's just been mistreated so much over and over again that he
Mm,
kind of like loses the will to fight for himself or defend
mhm,
himself,
mhm,
which
And
I
he
just
also,
already, yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, he also like his life that he lives doesn't really allow for him. Like, he is not in a position that he can really push back against, especially someone like Tong, who basically holds Joe's entire livelihood in his hand and has threatened him with it multiple times. So, like, I feel like
mhm,
calling someone a pushover when they're in like Joe's circumstances is like not necessarily considering his life circumstances. So I feel like you also have to take that into account with his character too.
mhm,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like he's not a wealthy person. It seems like he's comfortable in this current moment at least, but
Mm-hmm.
he's definitely not at the level that Tong, or I would say like any of his peers, are at.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also like, before Tong came into the picture, he was kind of content with that.
Yeah. He
But
was happy to be
things
a stunt
change.
double. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like Tong even goes as far as to make sure that they remove all the credits for Joe in the production. So it's like completely erasing him, like he doesn't even exist, even though he
Mm-hmm.
ended up doing all the work. And of course, like Tong is the one who manipulates Ming into making Joe miss that press conference and like chaining him up in his house and all of that stuff.
The whole chain of events. Chain,
Yeah.
literally chain of
Chain
events.
the chain of events. So essentially it's like Joe is thrust into the spotlight, which is something he never even wanted in the first place. And when Tong gets jealous of him because suddenly he's successful and like people want to actually hire him as an actor, he uses Ming to again emotionally manipulate Joe and get him blacklisted from the industry.
Mm-hmm.
mhm,
And so it's like, okay, he's left with nothing now. Joe literally has nothing. He has no family to support him. His two closest friends abandon him. And the person that he is in love with or thinks that he's in love with is just using him as a replacement for Tong because
Mm-hmm.
Ming originally liked Tong. So it's almost like he like doesn't even exist to anyone,
Yeah.
especially
mhm.
now because it's like he's invisible, especially now because he is blacklisted from the industry. But the crazy part of Joe's story is that it doesn't even end there. Like the tragedy doesn't even end. He literally has to take this gig with like a foreign production that is like really shady and known for like filming illegally and stuff. He has to go do a job for them because he lost his job and he ends up falling off the cliff and dying. Which already it's like, okay, you died. What's sadder than that?
Doesn't even get
Like,
peace in death though.
and then this man reincarnates into this guy who tried to kill himself. So now he has this mother who is in all of this debt because of medical bills from trying to save him slash her son. And then the mom is also sick herself. I think she has like diabetes or something like that.
Yeah. I think it's her
So
kidneys.
yeah, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So like the only choice that Joe feels like he has is going back into the entertainment industry. And then the whole cycle starts to repeat itself again, where
Mm-hmm.
he's being mistreated and like everyone is belittling him and all of this stuff. And Tong again hates him, even as a different Joe. He hates him. And it's just it's so sad. It's so sad. And then he gets shot.
He really goes through like every terrible thing that could happen to a person. Joe experiences it at some point in his two lifetimes. Like, give that man a
Literally. He gets shot for Ming, pretty much. Who you're never really sure if Ming actually loves him or if he loves the him as a replacement for Tong.
Mm-hmm.
So then Joe ends up in critical condition and he's in purgatory, and they're like, you can choose to live and maybe continue this cycle where you keep suffering and like living this life where you don't really have anybody or anything, or you can finally be at peace and die. And I can't imagine anything more depressing than that. Like, to me, in my opinion, Joe has got to be the poorest Meow Meow of them all. I really can't think of anyone who suffers so much throughout 2 lifespans.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And he chooses to do it again.
Yep. It's okay, though. He
Yeah.
breaks the cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, God, when you think about it, like Joe in his second life literally became a replacement for himself. Like, not even like he went from
Yes.
being a replacement from Tong in his initial life for Ming to in his second life being a replacement for first life Joe, because Ming at that point had realized that he was actually in love with Joe 1 for the sake of the narrative. So Joe 2, who has Joe 1's like soul in him, becomes the stand-in for Joe 1. It's just like his life. I mean,
Sad.
it's like there's only like the way he just powers through all of that and literally just continues and chooses to live again after everything. Like, oh my God, he really is the poorest Meow Meow. But yeah, he went through it.
Mm-hmm.
We can only hope he broke the cycle in his current life. I believe he did, because Ming got his shit together.
I have to imagine that he did, just because Tong ended up being exposed for also being like a scammer.
True. Tong was a whole other man. He definitely could have been in our red flag characters list. We put Ming on that
Right.
list, and like Tong was up there too. But
Yeah.
poor Joe.
Yeah. I don't have a lot to say about it because I still haven't watched it, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's basically the gist of what happened. So we got the summary.
The gist is he went through it. Endlessly went through it.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I did have. Okay, Joe was on my list, but I had other options because I knew he would be someone from my standard would probably be on your list. But I actually want to start for my list with a character from a Korean drama, and this might. I don't know if anyone is going to understand. I don't know if understand where I'm coming from with this, because it's a currently airing show, so I don't know how many people are watching it. I don't know if either of you have been watching it, but it's Let Free the Curse of Taekwondo, which is Hwang Da-sul's current drama. Lee Do-hae. Lee Do-hae is he is up there. I don't know if he's at Joe status, but he is up there, and I feel like I've been in the trenches for this character while the show is airing, because I think people just don't. I don't know. I think people aren't seeing the perspective of where he's coming from, and obviously everyone interprets the character differently. But like to give that similar context, the story starts with Lee Do-hae in high school. He grows up with this dad who is a Taekwondo instructor, very strict, very like by the book, by the rules person. But on top of that, he is also like actually abusive, like physically, emotionally. He's abusive towards Do-hae. He hits other kids that he's taught from Taekwondo. The show starts taking place in the early 2000s, so it was a time when corporal punishment was openly accepted in South Korea. So, teachers were allowed to hit their students. So his dad actively hits his students. He actively hits Do-hae both as a student and as his son. He's an alcoholic. Like, his dad is like trash father of the year. Like, he is up there. So this is someone he's grown up with. He's lived his entire life this way. His mother is no longer in the picture. In comes Shin Ju Young, who is like very much that like stereotypical sunshine character who gets sent to learn Taekwondo under Dohei's dad. And they fall in love and like, you know, find that comfort in each other and make this plan to basically both get into university and leave Dohei's hometown together and like go make it in Seoul basically and never have to look back on the abusive past that Dohei grew up in. And then a bunch of events happen basically on the day of Dohei's college entrance exams. Um, his dad and Ju Young get in this huge fight, and like the police get involved. Like his dad is hitting Ju Young is
Oh
fighting
my.
back. Dohei ends up ruining his college entrance exams,
Mhm.
and basically gets to the point where like he almost kills his dad. Like he picks up a knife and like has these thoughts
Oh
of
my
like I need
god.
to end this cycle. And
Wow.
this is someone who is like hated violence so viscerally his whole life because of his dad. Um,
Mhm.
then in that moment thinking like, you know, I need to basically kill this man to end this cycle. But like
Mhm.
that's basically the setup for his story. And then like we jump to 12 years later, and we find out that um him and Ju Young, like he left his hometown. They haven't been in contact for 12 years. Um the story picks back up again where basically his dad dies in a car accident. So he's like brought back and kind of forced to start confronting all of this abusive past that he has basically pushed away for the past 12 years, including meeting Ju Young again, who is someone he loves, but is also like a reminder of the past that he went through and the things that they experienced together. Um, and the show has not finished yet, but I
Mhm.
feel like just because of his backstory alone, that puts him at poor Meow Meow status. But also his actions as a result of that. You know, he's a kid who has grown up as in an abusive household, and is making decisions based on the abuse he experienced. And you know, we see him feeling so much guilt for what he went through and for what Ju Young went through at the hands of his father. We see why he's pushing Ju Young and people from his past away. Um, he's still trying to actively do that in the present, just kind of like this refusal to confront anything that has to do with that period of his life. And because of that, I guess his actions have come off as kind of mean towards Ju Young to a lot of the
Mhm.
audience. But I feel like when you're looking at it from the perspective of his character, like he's making decisions based on survival and protecting himself and also guilt. Um,
Mm.
and so, you know, there's still 2 episodes left in the story, but he is just so he's just like you the and I have to give props to the actor for this because there's just like this permanent sadness in his eyes that like
Mhm.
anytime there's a shot on him, I'm just like, I don't understand how you could not want to protect this character eternally because he's just been through so
Mm.
much and he holds it all in his eyes and in his expression. And like you can tell that he wants
Mhm.
to let himself be happy with Ju Young, but he is still so like riddled with the guilt of what they went through together and this resentment towards his father and the past that he had and the things he's had to experience that it's just like all mixes up in this just like heart wrenching portrayal of an abused kid like growing up. And I just like I don't know,
Mhm.
I connected with him so fast. Like the actor just like I don't know, something about the way the actor is pulling off this character has just like locked me into him. And so I just feel like he is such a poor Meow Meow, and he's just like one of those characters who, like you want to see him
Mm.
get better and take steps toward like actually experiencing the happiness and the freedom. Like the show is literally called Let Free the Curse of Taekwondo, like the freedom from his past and the things that he's gone through. So he's very much like my current poor Meow Meow. And I've literally been like writing paragraphs about the show, like in our server and like in other places, because I just feel so strongly about him. So I had to talk
Mhm.
about him during this episode.
Mhm. Huang Dasol just has a way with the stories she portrays in her shows, and I like watching that show. Really, also reminded me of like the uh, presence I felt watching Where Your Eyes Linger.
Yeah.
There's this mood over the whole show
Mm.
that is so similar. And yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. Like he is, yeah. It's such like a youthful show, but at the same time really sad
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
addictive. And yeah.
Yeah, like Huang Dasso knows how to write or direct, because I don't know she was the writer of the show, but knows how to create traumatic characters and just like make you
Mm-hmm.
really feel for their stories. Like the vibe of this, I think, in the way that the trauma and their backstory is being shown is very similar to My Star 2, where like you kind
Yeah.
of have to wait for the story to
Oh.
play out to fully understand
Mm-hmm.
like why the
What?
characters made the choices that they did, and
Mm-hmm.
get that like backstory kind of coming with each episode. So, and I know To My Star 2 was also kind of polarizing. Like a lot of people did not like how depressing it was compared to the original
Mm-hmm.
season of To My Star. But I love a show that makes me depressed. I love a show that makes me cry. So this show, and particularly Dohe as a character, have been like right up that alley and very much poor Meow Meow status.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
think
watch
she
it.
does longing very well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it's with To My Star and Where Your Eyes and everything. Like the longing you feel in the shows is just amazing.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So yeah,
yeah.
Dohe.
Yeah. So
Mm.
I wrote down one person. Which honestly, let's be honest, this is amazing for me to even have one
To have
written
something
down.
written down. Yeah.
Oh my
So
god.
we'll just like pat on the shoulder for that one, okay? Anyways, the first when we were talking about this on the Discord, the first that popped into my head was from Thailand, Ray from Only Frames.
Mm,
He's one of my honorable mentions. Yes, 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 yes.
Yes. I, especially for me when I was watching it, I felt a lot of his story like hit a lot of spots. Um like his struggle with addiction, him like you can do like the sad little rich boy, but he is basically invisible to his friends. Like they don't see him.
mhm.
He's there. They don't see him. They don't see his issues. They don't do anything about it, which, like, you can argue if it's their fault or not, because he's not talking about it either. But yeah, there's something so real about what he's going through, and I think also like his relationship with Sand is also very much built on Sand seeing how much of a sad boy he is and just want to
Mhm.
take care of him, right? Because Sand is like the ultimate I'm gonna take care of you character. So
Mhm.
obviously they're made for each other. But yeah, and you get to see his growth with like the therapy and just the scene with the in therapy like that. It's just
Mhm.
oh yeah, I yes, for those reasons, Ray is like sweet spot for this for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think Ray falls into one of those, that section, kind of like Lee Do-hye, of like the actions that he's making might be frustrating to you in the moment, but like if you look at the character, like you can understand like where he's
Mm-hmm.
coming from, and even if you don't necessarily agree with like the things he's doing, like
Mm-hmm.
because you can see why he's acting the way that he is, and like the desperation almost that he's acting out of, it almost makes him more like of a poor Meow Meow, because you're just like, I know why you're like this, and it's like
Yeah,
it's even makes it even more
you're so
heartbreaking to watch.
broken. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yes.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm always gonna feel bad for a character also, I think, that like receives a lot of criticism from the fandom.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like people being very critical about just like addiction
Mm-hmm.
and
Hmm.
things like that. It makes me feel like I want to protect the character more because I'm like, no, you guys don't understand. He's a poor
Yep.
meow meow. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he
Absolutely.
makes bad decisions, but I mean, that's life, don't we all?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
I feel like I can segue back into Korea uh, and talk about Shiwan from Blooming.
Uh, yeah. Once again, Hwang Da-sol. Mm-hmm.
Yep. I might be repeating myself a little because I feel like I've talked about this show so much, but the reason why I love it is because you feel like so much sympathy and empathy for Shiwan as, I guess, the main character of the show. And I feel like parental trauma is usually the number one cause of poor meow meowism.
Mm-hmm.
Having some kind of trauma associated with your family or parents. It's like so often a trope in these series. And for Shiwan, I think there's a lot more going on than just that. But that is definitely the worst of it,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. Like, if I'm remembering correctly, it was that his father leaves them, and then the mother is like very verbally and emotionally abusive towards him and his sister, but I feel like he really gets the brunt of it as like the son, the
Mm-hmm.
oldest son or whatever. And then she's basically encouraging him the whole show to have an eating disorder, and she's really controlling over what he can and cannot eat, drink, do. She has a lot of like high expectations for him that border on like not even being possible to all achieve at once.
Mm-hmm.
Um and like I said, the his trauma with his mom isn't the only thing he goes through, but that's definitely the number one thing that I think plagues him is just the connection that has to Korean beauty standards, which I'll probably get into. But I feel like Shiwan is like the prime character example of someone who has pressure coming at him from like every corner of society.
Mm-hmm.
Like he has a Korean beauty standard pressure to look a certain way and be handsome, and he has the educational academic pressure to be top of his class, and then he has like a pressure as well to have like a likable personality, to not be like too antisocial or whatever, to basically like perform a version of himself to everyone else so that they like him and that they accept him. And he's just really suffering, and he bottles it all up because he doesn't want to inconvenience anyone. And he also doesn't want to be alienated by others or society as a whole. And it just builds up until he can't handle it and he snaps. And like that scene where he does snap will forever be ingrained in my mind. Like it had like such a I had such like a visceral reaction to it because I related to him and I felt like so much empathy for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that the way his insecurities affect his relationship with Daun is really interesting because he kind of has that trauma response of wanting to push him away so he doesn't get hurt or get like too close to somebody, and he in his mind he kind of assumes that people already might not like him, because he just doesn't think that highly of himself, even though he to the world it seems like he's like this really like put together confident person who just like has their shit together, even though it's
Mm-hmm.
under the surface that's not the truth. And he's kind of living a lie in that sense, which is really sad to me too. And he's very much fighting his inner demons
Mm-hmm.
and the expectations that his mom, society, and like he's also putting on himself. And it's just there's a lot that could I feel like there's a lot of social commentary in it, just like from where the series is set. Like we know that South Korea has a really cutthroat education system that puts a lot of pressure on students. They have a huge bullying problem.
Mm.
The Korean beauty standard is so strict with how people think you should look. Um, and then even like I guess even like the job market is like very cutthroat as well,
Mhm.
like all of that stuff. So I just think of all that pressure and how I would not be able to handle that. And I'm like, this character is just like Shiwan is just going through it. And I can't imagine how many people are like going through this same exact thing right now. And it just makes me feel even sadder for him. And like, yeah, he's definitely a poor meow meow. And it's sad again. That's the
Yeah.
conclusion.
Mhm.
Yeah. I always think about there's that one scene that always sticks out to me, aside from like the big confrontation scene, where he's with Dawoon, and there's this moment where I think he's like they're talking about like his favorite movies, and like he says this like really avant-garde like French movie, and then he's like, I
Mhm.
lied, it's actually like whatever. I can't remember what he said. But then like
Yeah.
Dawoon like pats his head, and Shiwan like goes to be like prickly and pull away, but then he realizes that like he actually likes the comfort and like puts his hand back and has him like pat him again. So like it kind of feeds into like he wants like someone who will love and see him in that way, but
Mhm.
at the same time like it
Mhm.
shows like he still kind of had this guard up to keep this persona, this image that he had painted for himself that he thought was expected of him, and was also still kind of keeping that guard up with Dawoon and like not wanting to necessarily let him break down that wall yet, but he also like really wanted to lean into the comfort from him. And I feel like that was a really good moment that also kind of showed his character thoughts and processes. And it always sticks
Yeah.
out to me when I think about that show.
Yeah. Whenever a character is like um I guess like hardened to life, but you could tell that like they're barely keeping it together, I'm like, that is a poor meow meow.
Mhm.
Can relate.
Mhm.
uh, yeah. I feel like I can kind of segue back to Thailand again, kind of on the front of parental trauma or familial trauma. Caleb, this might be the same. I feel like this could be the same from us, but from Thailand, and also for my GL pick, I said Sam from Gap.
So did I.
Yeah, yeah,
So did
yeah.
I.
I kind of figured that would be the same.
Mhm.
Yeah, Sam is just like they could never make me hate her. She is another like we keep
Never.
going back to these characters who are like so addled with all of these pressures that they've been put under and having to make decisions under that pressure. Sam is very much in that position because she's getting this familial pressure from her grandma, and there's like these certain expectations about what she'll do from a business standpoint, having a relationship or a marriage that will help her business and help her family's place in society. She also has this pressure of being basically the only grandchild that her grandmother has left, because her one sister did pass away, right? I'm not remembering that
Mhm.
incorrectly. Yeah, so her one sister
Yeah.
did pass away, and the other sister basically ostracized herself from the family, both because of those both of those things were a result of the pressures that like Sam is currently experiencing as like the one remaining grandparent. I keep saying grandparent, grandchild. So like she's pulled in so many different directions because she's going through what her sisters have went through. Like she understands why one of them wanted to leave to be with the woman that she loved, while the other one just chose to leave and cut herself off from the family. But she also still has like this familial duty to her grandmother. And I think she obviously does love her grandmother. So she's also pulled in the direction of like feeling the pressure to appease what her grandmother wants from her from a business and relationship and marital perspective. So she's kind of entered into this pseudo relationship with Hang's character, whose name I can't remember now. With this
Kirk.
idea that Kirk, thank you, fucking Kirk, with this idea that like they're planned to be married in the future, but Sam is very basically like she's like shut off her emotions. Like she's made herself
Mhm.
a non-emotional person so that she can basically appease her grandmother. And then in comes Mon to the picture, and obviously Sam develops these feelings for her and is trying very hard to like fight against them. Like they make up all these rules. Like I always think about when they were literally kissing each other and they're just like, "Oh, I'm just biting your lips," because like they didn't want to admit that like they were doing these romantic actions with each other, because Sam wasn't quite ready to admit that like, okay, I really have feelings for this woman and this is going to force me to confront all of this stuff that I've basically shut out and kind of accepted as my reality. Um, and she's another person where it kind of like builds up in this big confrontational scene with her grandmother where she wants to choose to leave her family to be with Mon, and then her grandmother gets sick. So she's once again pulled back into this fold of like, this person I love is dying and I think I'm making that worse, so I need to do what she wants me to do. But then like, you know, she still wants to be with Mon, and she's just like stuck in this cycle. And obviously like in the end, like the grandmother comes around eventually, and you know, she gets to be with Mon, and I still get emotional every time I think about their wedding scene, because like I literally sobbed when that happened. But just like
Mhm.
the cycle that she went through to try and like come to terms with loving this woman, while also coming to terms with what her place was in her family and trying to fight that and trying to find how she could navigate all these different paths that she was expected to be on. Oh, I felt for her so bad. And I just like, she was a character that another one that I just really connected with for those reasons. So yes, Sam from Gap.
Yeah, literally all of that. And I also I felt bad for her from like a I think like a cultural standpoint too, because like people don't understand that like as frustrated as you get with Sam when you're like she needs to stand up to her grandma, she needs to
Mm-hmm.
start like saying no to things. It's also like in a household like hers, you really are expected to like live for your parents or your guardian
Mhm.
and like not for yourself. So it's like even if you get to do some things, you kind of have to compromise by doing something else that
Mm-hmm.
the parent or guardian wants. Like I think the I might be misremembering this, but I'm pretty sure the grandma said something like you can see Mon like in secret or something, but you still have to marry Kirk. And I was like,
Yeah.
I understand it though, like that kind of like compromise of like, well, I'm gonna give you like a little bit of freedom or like a taste of freedom, but you still have to do what I say.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
I felt it. I felt so bad for Sam because of that too, just like coming from that perspective. And like any queer character who has to kind of like live a lie and box themselves in is like so
Mm-hmm.
poor meow meow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Yeah. So while you guys were talking, I added another person to my list.
Hmm.
So we're going over to Taiwan, and Wei Shan from Unknown.
I did
If
think
you
about
haven't,
putting him on my list.
yeah, if you haven't watched Unknown, if anyone hasn't watched it, he is basically becomes the head of the house. He has a sister, and he adopts a kid that is not that much younger than him, a little bit, and he raises these kids, and he does
Mm.
everything for them. And
Mm-hmm.
he puts his own life and well-being on the back burn to make sure these kids have a good life.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole, like, his whole story is so tragic. And even when times are times get better, they're still so tragic for him.
It's like that residual guilt is still there, and
Yes.
yeah.
Mm.
and like the boy refuses to go to the doctor to get checked. Like, what are you even doing, boy? Like, I someone needs to take care of him. And obviously he has someone that does that, but he chases him away.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a lot of feelings around Unknown and that whole storyline. And it's kind of like the other side to like a family situation, right? Where the head of the family is literally doing everything for everyone else other
Yeah.
than expecting things from
Yeah.
the kids.
Yeah, he was
So,
basically forced to become the head of the household. Um,
yeah.
and, that's a whole different kind of familial trauma almost. I mean, because the mom was still in the picture somewhat, but she was still alive, but she was an addict. And
Mhm.
then she just like abandoned them basically.
Yeah.
And then she overdosed, didn't she?
Yeah, I think she would do.
Yeah. So,
Mm.
yeah. So then that's kind of leaves him with taking care of his kid sister. And, eventually, at first, he is pushing away. I can't think of the other character's name.
Yeah, I can't say his name, so
Um,
Wei Shiwan?
Wei Shihuan. At first he is pushing him away because like he knows from a logical standpoint that like he can't afford to take care of him, but
Mhm.
I don't want to use the word pity because I don't want to say that their relationship started from a place of pity, but like
Yeah.
he keeps seeing this kid and like eventually he can't deny that like this kid also needs help.
It's more
Um,
like he has a bleeding heart. I don't he
yeah,
just like
Right.
he sees
Mhm.
another kid who was like in a similar situation to him and is like, I don't want to just leave this kid on his own. And like he ends up getting
Mhm.
involved with the gang to be able to like take care of his family and like take on any type of, like you said, do anything to be able to provide for his family. um and yeah, he's definitely a person because that show kind of goes through the years who like you can see how it's all kind of built up his like avoidance of the things that he's went through and the
Mhm.
responsibility that he had to take on from such a young age. It all kind of builds up to him being this like very emotionally closed off person, and that's why
Mhm.
he pushes Wei Shihuan away. Compared with combined with the fact that obviously like they grew up together and there's that kind of
Mhm.
pseudo familial relationship, but not really familial. Like um,
Yeah. Yeah, I think like for him, like he's always seen him as family in the sense of like a little brother, and having to like switch off that thought doesn't
hmm
happen like that.
hmm hmm yeah. So yeah, and he's
Yeah.
also scared of like how that changes the whole dynamic of their little family that they have, including
Mm.
the sister and what that would mean for
I
her and
mean,
stuff
he
like that.
freaked out when she started dating
His best
his
friend. Yeah.
friend. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he doesn't
So,
like change, honestly.
Mm.
No, but also
yeah.
like the trauma he has from his mom, and him feeling like he is the reason his mom died and he couldn't take care of
Mhm.
his mom. So he's using all of those feelings, like put them all into his life, and that's what like makes him act the way that he is towards everyone
Mhm.
around him.
Mhm.
It's like even the like the mob boss is kind of likes him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like the we talked about in the review that like the mob boss has like this kind of like ethics,
Mhm.
he's very much like, okay, you paid your dues to me and I
Yeah.
respect what you're trying to do, so go on your way. But then it's like the other,
Yeah, he
his
always
lackey
worked hard.
basically.
He
Yeah.
always worked hard. He didn't do any bullshit. So like yeah. He encourages like familial bonds like with everyone around him.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a good one. I did think about putting him on my list, but in the end I edged him out for this pick is in honor of Heather. She said we had to talk about Yushigu from Make Our Days Count, who might arguably be the
The most.
He's up there.
Poor Meow Meow is like a lot of
Yeah.
these characters we've talked about eventually, or we can assume that eventually circle back around to having basically their happy ending, or at least a
Yeah.
content ending. But Yushi,
Hmm.
obviously, if you have watched Make Our Days Count, dies. So, and he doesn't get reincarnated like Joe that we
Nope.
know of. So his story is basically like the moment he does start to feel that like contentness and that happiness, and we see him building a life, and like they're comfortable and happy and kind of finding this place together, he dies. And then obviously there's no, like, I don't know, it was just so
They didn't have
painful.
salt, so he dies.
He dies. Yeah, it's quite literally like the definition of tragedy. Like he went out to pick up salt and got hit by a car. So yeah, it's just like you see this character who is basically raising himself. Like he lives on his own in like this little tiny studio that he's working to pay for. He's also very focused on his academics because he sees that as his way out of the situation that he's in. You know, he's very much like, if I can get into a good school and get a job, then that'll get me out of the cycle of like poverty and struggle that I've always lived in. He's kept to himself for that reason, to kind of just focus on this goal he has of getting out of his situation and um, getting into a better place in life. And then, of course, you know, he meets why can't I remember names today? Hao Ting, right?
Mm.
Is that his name?
Hmm.
Hmm. I think so.
Yes,
Yeah.
he meets Hao Ting, and obviously it's that trope of like he meets this person who flips like that's common across a lot of these characters, is like the person that they meet is kind of like very opposite to them and like kind of flips things and makes them really start to confront the reality that they've been living in for so long. And so like we
Hmm.
see him go on this journey of like, I mean, obviously, him and Hao Ting kind of start off as like an enemy sort of situation. There's some animosity there. He sees Hao Ting as very like flippant and not taking life seriously. But then, like, we see this relationship gradually get closer, and he gets to that point where like they're finally getting their happiness, and then his life quite literally gets ripped away, and then that happiness and contentment gets ripped away from Hao Ting too, and he has to kind of confront that reality of like losing that person. So, I
Hmm.
mean, it's
Yeah,
just like
I think like he is such a tragic sad boy that I do not accept the episode where he dies. I just like the show ended the episode before. I
they
refuse.
decided they didn't need salt for their meal, and all was
Yes.
all was well.
They're still happily living together, just living their best life. I do not accept that he had a sad ending. That is
Mm.
how tragic that ending is. Like how there aren't any other shows that has done this.
Mm-mm. I don't think so.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really can like kind of flip that like happy-go-lucky BL ending on its head, and kind of, I mean, obviously the 10th episode kind of examines like how you move on and learn to find yourself again after losing a loved one. And you know, there's been some follow-ups from that with cameos and other shows kind of in universe. But yeah, I mean, there's not many shows where they'll kill off in the BL universe. There's not many shows where they'll kill off one of the main characters in the show and leave it that way.
Hmm.
When you say that, I sort of want to do a segue into the most tragic two boys that you want to just save, Corn and In from I'm Telling You
Oh
Again.
my
No.
god, Pixie! Don't remind me.
Oh boy.
I mean, when we're talking about tragic, sad boys, like, it
Yeah.
doesn't get anywhere. Like, I don't even think like I need to explain this for anyone that has watched this show.
God, yeah. That's a tough
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, it's another one of those character arcs where they have a tough life all their life and then they die. And
Yeah.
then it
Mhm.
feels like it was for
Mhm.
nothing.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
And like the show does give them sort of like a happy ending, but it's not happy. They're dead. Like there's they died. There's no
Their
happy.
ghosts are happy though.
Yeah. And I mean, like, their reincarnations get to live
Happily
happily.
together.
So, like, you can
That's
argue
gotta be
that at least in one
as
life.
sad as like ghosts like watching your reincarnation
But they got
living
closure from
happily.
that. They showed
Yeah,
their little
I
spirits
know.
getting closure from that. So I
Yeah,
guess it was enough for them. But yeah, definitely
they're still ghosts.
very tragic in life for them.
Man, their story is even sadder because none of that needed to happen, and it really
Mm.
just happened because of the era that they lived in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Literally.
Well, this isn't gonna pick up the mood, but I did have one character from Japan that I thought of from one of my favorite series of all time, Yuki from Life Love on the Line.
Mm.
This one's a little briefer than the other ones, I think, but I still feel strongly that he's a poor Meow Meow because like I think one of the most tragic character arcs is like when a character who has that happy go lucky, bubbly, happy personality kind of gets humbled by life or they experience a traumatic event and it just
Mm-hmm.
completely changes their personality and
Mm-hmm.
they become like really introverted and just like cold and all of that stuff. And Yuki is, I mean, that's kind of what happens to him. He starts off as like this really happy student who's super outgoing and he falls in love with Akira, who goes to like a neighboring high school. And it ends up working out for them. Like they get together and they're together through high school, they're together through college, and then as young adults, they're like secretly living together as a couple.
Mm-hmm.
But then it all takes a turn when Akira has his little midlife crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like Yuki takes the blow from Akira's midlife crisis
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
because Akira has that societal and familial pressure to settle down. Like nobody knows that he's with Yuki. They want him to get married and have kids and all of this stuff. And he starts to convince himself that that's what he should be doing. So he leaves Yuki, but like he leaves him with zero explanation at
Mm-hmm.
all. Like he just disappears one day.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the fuck? Like how could you do this to Yuki, like to not even I guess say goodbye really
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
be like I guess he does say like I want to break up, but we don't really see anything more than that. They just end up they like
No
it time
closure.
skips. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in the years following, you see like Yuki becomes like the shell of his former self and he spends all of his days like going to the bar, getting drunk and like hooking up with random guys, just trying to like feel something but also feel like someone wants him
Mm-hmm.
because he still doesn't know why Akira left him, but the fact that he doesn't know kind of makes him jump to conclusions in his own head where he's like I must have done something wrong. I must have like been to this or been to that or not been enough in the first place. And it really terrorizes him just like
Mm-hmm.
his own assumptions and thoughts about why he's alone now
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
after being with this person seemingly content for years. And I just think it's really sad. And then the one thing that he always wanted to do with Akira was go see the Northern Lights, but he can't go with him anymore, so he decides to go by himself. And Akira is there also by himself. And then they have their little fight in the snow that's so sad. And then, long story short, they do end up getting back together and having like the happy rest of their life.
Mm-hmm.
But just thinking about how many years Yuki wasted just being
Yeah.
so depressed when
Yep.
that should have been like the prime like years of his life. It's so sad. It feels like it was for nothing.
Mhm.
almost. Like, I think if I was Yuki, I would hold that against Akira forever,
Mm,
because you have that like BL brain where you're like, I want them to get together eventually, like have to be together in the end.
Mhm.
But also I'm kind of like, Akira just did him so wrong
yeah.
that I almost like kind of hold it against him, but also don't, because I understand the pressure that he was also going through. And he's kind of a poor Meow Meow in his own regard. But
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yuki gets the short end of the stick, and
Mhm.
he just like endured so much heartache for what felt like nothing. So
Yeah.
I wanted to save him.
Yeah.
God, I hadn't watched Life Love on the Line in so long. And you
Yeah.
were just like going through all the details. I was just reminded of everything I went through watching that show. And I was just like, oh my
It's
God.
depressing.
Trauma. It's back.
It does remind me of Let Free the Curse of Taekwondo in some ways. It's very much
Mm.
like they, live this happy go lucky youthful moment in their younger
Mhm.
days, and then the reality of their situations hit, and then we get this big jump in time where both of them are just suffering, and it's like seeing them come back together. I think the structure of the stories, although the characters go through different things, kind of evoke those similar emotions. So
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds similar.
yeah,
I
well,
just feel bad.
it's so funny how I was like, this will be like a more casual breakup of like some of the more serious topics, but we chose like the most depressing list episode to do. Oh my God. But I don't know. I did have one more on my main list from Japan, but the more I've been thinking about it, I feel stronger about some people that I had on my honorable mentions list. So, and this is going to be very brief because I don't want to say too much because it's once again still ongoing, which is kind of why I didn't
Mm.
put them on my list initially. But
Mhm.
both Jack and Joke from Jack and Joker.
Same. Same.
Oh my God, they are both such poor Meow Meows in very different ways. Jack obviously is a victim to circumstances of growing up in poverty, being left, him and his grandma are basically left with his parents. Oh my God, his story is so tragic. I just thought about it, how like we find out that his parents like took out this loan to improve their business, and then the business started failing. So his parents decided to kill themselves so that their family could collect like their life insurance. But then there was a clause that if they committed suicide, they wouldn't get the life insurance money. So like
Mhm.
they literally killed themselves for nothing. And then the grandma and Jack are just left with the debt. Oh my God, it's so tragic. And then, so he's left with this debt that he is trying to get on the national Taekwondo team because he thinks this will be his ticket to success, and it doesn't work out. And he ends up working for a debt collector. And I'm trying to speed run through this because Pixie, I know you also haven't had a chance to start it yet, have you? So I
I've
don't want to.
started it, but I haven't watched
Okay.
everything.
I don't want to
Oh.
spoil too much, so I'm trying to speed run the tragedy of their lives. And then, Joke, he's kind of like this grows up wealthy, but is not the type of person that his parents want or expect him to be. He's living in his younger brother's shadow, and he's not very good at academics, which his parents have this expectation that he'll be a doctor, but he can't achieve those expectations.
Mhm.
So he turns to basically like a form of vigilante justice, acting as the Joker because stealing is the one thing he sees that he's good at, and acting as these personas is the one thing that he's good at. Um, and then they get tangled. He gets tangled up with Jack and thinks he's helping him, but actually ends up making Jack's life worse. And Joke goes
Mhm.
to prison for 5 years, and it's just like they're both such poor Meow Meow characters. I think Jack, very much from his circumstances, and obviously he is still currently dealing with the fallout of everything he went through. But Joke, emotionally, like, he is another one that just has like the saddest eyes that anytime anything happens, your heart just like breaks because War is such a good actor, and like the looks that
Mhm.
he can, the emotions that he can just evoke with just a single look is just like, yeah. I feel
Mhm.
like there's a lot, but because like I wasn't planning on talking about them, I can't articulate it very well. But
Mhm.
Jack and Joke very much poor Meow Meow characters.
Can I say I also thought about talking about War. I also thought about my mechanic is not wait. What's it
My
called?
uh,
Love mechanics?
Love
yeah,
mechanics. Thank you.
I almost said my engineer.
War's character in that too is so
Yeah.
Mhm.
sad. The fact that he like had a crush on this other boy and he was totally run over, and yes, he was a little bit aggressive about it, but we'll leave that. But like he was so sad, and then you get involved with this boy who has a girlfriend, and he gets like I mean, he's pretty much pushed around and toyed with for a
Mm.
really long time, and it's just he just wants love. I don't-
Mm.
so sad.
That's the running
War.
theme with his characters.
War playing characters who just want love. Yes. Broken characters who just want love. Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
This is bread and butter right there.
yeah, and he does it so
I
well.
was gonna say he's so good at it. Gets me every time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. There's another thing about Joke's character that, because I had that as him as an honorable mention, that like made me feel really sad, and it's that like I feel like everyone automatically like looks at him and expects to be disappointed by him, or
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
expects him to be like, I don't know, a horrible person or something. Like they don't really
Because of
see
the
him for
choices he
him.
made. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't see him for him, and it makes me feel so sad for him.
Yeah.
And of course, War, we this acting is a big part
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. There are parts of his story that remind me of Mulk from Last Twilight, who I also almost put on my list.
Oh.
Where in that like he's trying so hard to be better, but because the people around him are so used to this, like first of all, like he went to prison. So there's the societal, like the way society looks down on people who have served time or have criminal records, no matter whether they deserve them or not, which like technically in Joke's
Mhm.
case he did, and he turned himself in, so
Yep.
but it's also like from a familial standpoint with Joke, like his parents, his dad particularly refuses to see that he's actually making an effort to being a different
Mhm.
person,
Yeah.
and refuses to, even when he first meets Jack again, he's like, has the passage of time not let you see me any differently? Same, he's had that same conversation with his
Mm.
dad. It's like people refuse to look past the things he did in the past and see the person that he is trying very hard to be now, and it like makes him feel very dejected, and he's like, is there really a
Mhm.
point to me trying to be a better person, basically? So
Yeah.
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 Yes. Well,
Mm.
spoiler alert for anyone who is going watching this far in the episode, we have plans to do a deep dive of Jack and Joker, so I'm sure we'll go a lot more
We'll
into
get
detail
into it.
about both of the
Yeah.
characters then. But I was just thinking about them and felt like I needed to shout them out in the poor Meow Meow list. So
Mhm.
do you guys have anyone else on your actual list, or do we want to speed roll through honorable mentions?
Yeah. I just have some honorable mentions.
Mhm.
Um, Babe from Pit Babe.
Yeah.
uh, he's another one where it feels like everyone's just kind of like using him,
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
he kind of has to accept it. I don't know how else to put it. Um, and then we already talked about Ray. We talked about Joke. I also had Tantai from Laws of
Oh,
Attraction.
ooh, yeah.
Mhm.
And Nung Diao from Never Let Me Go. He is one of
Yeah.
my personal top poor Meow Meows. Um, and then I just had like every single character from War of Y. Everyone, literally everyone, is going through it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
all.
My honorable mentions, I did have Joe. He was on my list. I, I did not let myself put someone from my Food Linger in the Air on my main list, but I did put Jom on my honorable mentions because he went through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, Yai could be a poor Meow Meow for me too, um, for two very different reasons. But I specifically put Jom on my list because of the things he went through with Ohm and quite literally getting transported to another dimension and having to learn to live in that dimension and fall in love and only to have that ripped away, which Yai also had that ripped away. So both poor Meow Meows for that reason. Um, And then I also had Hero from Perfect Propose, which I don't know if either of you watched that. But he's very much like riddled by the. We've talked a lot about the work life in Japan. He's someone who's very much riddled by the pressures of that, and it impacts his daily life and the way he approaches relationships. And then I also had Yutaka from Our Dining Table on my honorable mentions list. Oh, and Meth from He's Coming to Me.
Ah.
Gotta get that ghost mention in there, that ghost BL mention.
I have
But
one last, which technically I don't know. Like, if okay, the reason why I would put him here is because he's just very pitiful. Adachi from Cherry Magic. Like, technically he hasn't like any gone through a lot of drama, but he's just such a pitiful character. Like, you just wanted to take care of him because like he has no social antennas at all, and all the anxiety he has and just everything, like, you just, I feel so sorry for him.
yeah, yeah. If you see you see his daily life and you're like, we could fix that. I could fix that for you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that is all for our list of poor Meow Meow characters or most tragic characters or however you want to describe it in BL and GL. Be sure to let us know down below what you thought of our lists, who else you would put on your list for biggest poor Meow Meows in BL or GL. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. All of those things really help out with the algorithm and help get our channel spread around. And share the episode with your friends because that stuff also really helps us out as well. We have a Patreon that you can check on, the link down in the description. We have a lot of exclusive reviews and reactions and extra interview content over there. And it's also a great way to support the show if that's something you're interested in. But otherwise, that's all we have for you in this episode, and we will see you guys again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, diverse. Pixie, I know you're just going to be winging it, so...
Yes, I did put like one down. Just